So to start off with, right, let me talk to you a little bit about product management, right? I just did a quick Google search for what product management is, and that was the definition, right? The product manager is responsible for the strategy, roadmap, and feature definition of that product. He sets a product vision and strategy. He defines what the product team will deliver and the timeline for the implementation, provides cross-functional leadership, most notably between engineering teams, sales, marketing, and support. So as you can see, all of this information was pretty much gathered from me looking at different product management role postings, and just I searched product management definition, and that's what I got. And as you can see, this kind of summarizes what product management is you're kind of like, the way I like to put it is you're a mini CEO of a product, right? Like you're responsible for not only building your product, you're responsible for selling it, you're responsible for understanding what it takes to kind of support this product that you're building. How do you grow it? How do you make your product? How do you diversify it? How do you continually improve? How do you support it? So these are all the things that, if you look at it, comes under the job responsibilities of a product manager. And if you think about it, a CEO itself, when he's managing a company, is kind of looking into all of these factors as well, right? Like, how is my company running? How are the financials looking? How is our product development process going on? So I see a lot of parallels that way. So you're kind of like a mini CEO. So with that, I just like to talk to you about what are some of the things I have recognized that I've needed to get better at to become a better product manager, right? So I'd like to start off with effective communication. I think, as you saw, right, like a product manager, his job involves working with a multitude of teams. And a lot of the times what you'll realize is you're working with teams where you require your teams to do some work for you, right? Like product management is very much a collaborative role, and you interact with a variety of teams throughout your day-to-day life, right? You interact with engineering, you could interact with marketing, you could interact with legal, finance, operations, field operations, sales, support. There's an innumerable number of teams that you're always working with. And these teams are looking at you to let them know where everything's heading, right? They need to be aware of like what's coming down the pipeline. What is the expectation from their side, right? And in order to be on top of that, I think what's important is actually effective communication, right? Like everyone should always be aware, right? All right, what is my responsibility? What is my goal? And what is my target date for when I need to hit that goal, right? Like as a product manager, it's not your job to get all of that done, to do all of that rather, but your job is to get all of that done, right? And the best way to always stay on top of things is effective communication. And another thing that I've realized works well because of effective communication is actually it helps you set expectations, right? As a product manager, you deal with your customers on a day-to-day basis, you deal with your stakeholders on a day-to-day basis. And if you're not very clear and concise about, what you want to talk about, or just about what are the product priorities, what are the features coming down the pipeline, it can often set the wrong expectation. So you don't want a stakeholder to come into a meeting, think that you're building a feature for him, go back, and 3 months down the line when he's expecting it, nothing comes up, right? So I think effective communication is very important to not only set that expectation with all of your stakeholders, but also on the side of, say, on your engineering teams, right? Like you need to be clear about, if I need a feature by a particular date, you need to let them know, and you need to keep hammering that point away, right? So that's one of the big pieces. The second one, I believe, is trust. This again follows along the theme of product management being very much a team-oriented role. So you work on a day-to-day basis with, people from various teams, right? And how is the only way you can get them to work with you effectively is by gaining their trust, right? Like they need to understand that when you come to them with a particular request, that it is genuine, right? Like it's not that you're asking them to do something for frivolous reasons, but they understand that, hey, if a request came from you, it probably has some value to it, and I'd like to help you with it, right? And gaining trust is not an easy exercise. It takes some time. It takes effort into it. There's a lot that goes into gaining trust. So I think that is one of the key points, right? And not only that, I think trust also goes down at your team level, where as a product manager, I think you're responsible to launch a big product, right? And to do that, what happens is it's not just you who's doing it. There's, again, this whole concept of everyone on your team is involved, right? And if you trust your team enough to do the tasks that have been assigned to them effectively, you will notice that as you grow in your product management field and as you start delegating work to different people and trusting them to get that done, you will start seeing success more and more. And not only that, you'll become a more effective product manager because people will enjoy working with you and they'll want to work with you more and more. The next one, I think, which is a very key aspect, is leadership, right? So again, common theme. We are working with different teams, but all of these teams aren't directly reporting to you. But at the same time, you need to get them to do some work for you, which will allow you to make your launch successful, right? So you need to be able to influence these teams that you're working with without having direct authority on them, right? You need to be able to motivate them, you need to be able to guide them, because you're the one who has the knowledge as to what needs to get done, when, and why. And it's your responsibility to kind of let your team know and trust them to actually get the stuff done for you. Another important factor is actually prioritization. In product management, you will often see that there's requests coming into you from multiple places, right? There's always going to be requests for features coming in from different teams. And each feature request is high priority for every single team, right? But in reality, you can't really work on everything every single day. You need to be able to prioritize. And more importantly, you need to learn to say no. If you keep taking on stuff, you keep saying, okay, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to help you. Chances are you might be able to help one or two of those, and the two other guys you said yes to are all of a sudden left without any help, and then you lose trust with them, and that's a whole another area you don't want to go into, right? So you need to be very comfortable saying no when you think that person X's priority doesn't trump what your team is working on, right? And another way to be able to say no better is to actually establish frameworks, right? Like when you're making decisions about prioritization, if you can back up your decision with data, and if you let people know that, hey, here's the reason why I'm picking feature A or feature B, because this is the revenue impact, this is the number of new users that come in, this is the number of new clicks we get on our website, right? That there's different success metrics that you can choose, and you can use those and actually use them in your prioritization exercise and back up your decisions with data. The next one, and that one I believe is one of the most important characteristics, is customer obsession, right? At the end of the day, as a product manager, you're not often building tools for yourself. You're actually building tools for your customers, right? And these could be internal customers, these could be external customers. You need to be obsessed with these guys, right? Like you need to know what they want, what they don't want, what they like, what they do not like, because at the end of the day, you're their representative in the room, and the success of your product depends on how well your customers will adopt your product, how well they like it. And then the only way for them to really like your product and really adopt it is if you've built a product that they want, right? And to do that, you really, really have to be obsessed with your customers. You always need to think about, okay, what would my customer want? And this insight is not easily gained. You have to go out, speak to your customers, do surveys. So that's something that's super critical. The next one, I believe, is problem solving. Because if you think about it, right, as a product manager, what you're doing effectively is building products to solve problems that are out there in the world today, right? Like your product was built with a goal of solving a particular problem for a particular set of customers. And then as your product grows, your set of customers grow and different problems arise. And again, it's up to you to figure out, how do I solve this problem, right? So effective problem solving is very crucial towards becoming a successful product manager. And what I've realized is one of the big plus points about that is actually about inventing and simplifying, right? Like when you're thinking about problem solving, you never have to come up with extremely complex and like really long solutions. Try to think about how you can do more with less, right? And if you can solve a problem with, say, using the least amount of resources possible and getting a feature out as quickly as possible, your teams will love you. Your customers will love you because they gave you a problem and you fixed it for them in the next day, the next week, the next month, however long it takes, right? The next one is curiosity. And the reason I like to talk about this is because as a product manager, you're continually learning, I feel. Your market's always evolving, new use cases always coming up. You want to grow your product to reach different segments of the customers. So this only happens is if you are curious about what's out there, right? Like you're trying to understand, can I acquire new customers? You're trying to understand, how can I actually grow my product well, right? You're going out and you're trying to talk to your customers. You're trying to figure out, what are my competitors doing that I'm not doing? And what could I be doing to get those customer bases in, right? Like you always want to keep thinking, how can I continually improve? And to do that, you have to be curious, right? Always anticipate the needs of your customers and try to preempt them before they come to you. And lastly, and I'd like to caveat this, this is not something that's absolutely essential to become a product manager. However, having the technical acumen definitely helps, right? Like you will, like if you're not a technical engineer or you have not worked within technology, does not mean you can't become a product manager. But if you have, and if you apply for a software product management role, it does not help. It does not hurt at all, right? Like you can talk to your software engineers at a level that is slightly lower than what, say, a non-technical product manager could, right? Like, say you can talk to them about what's the code base, what language is the code base written in, how are the APIs structured, so you can really dig into the details. And when you're having a discussion, what I've also realized is if you have the technical acumen, you can also then think about the limitations of the system that you're working on. And then you can also think about, okay, what are the realistic expectations for me to expect from what software or what platform I have today? I forgot I have this. So with that being said, I think those are some of the key skill sets and key points that I've felt have been important for me as I've grown in my career. So with that, I'd like to move on to our second part, which is, how would you position yourself to transition to this product management role, right? So now you know, hey, these are some of the skill sets that people need. This is what product management is. Now, how do I get there, right? To start off with, right, like always identify your skills, right? Like I love the fact that most of you today are not in product management. So hopefully my talk will get you more interested in product management. But that being said, I made the switch from a non-product management role, right? So to do that, first what I did was I sat down and said, all right, what are some skills that I have that could potentially translate over to product management, right? And this could be anything from like unique industry experience, right? Let's say, for example, I used to work in a financial technologies firm, and they were in the space of online lending, which is a pretty niche firm, right? Niche subject area. But as a part of my role, I learned quite a lot about the industry, how the systems work, and I parlayed that information to kind of make my switch, right? Technical or leadership skills, right? Like, as you saw, product management requires a lot of technical and leadership skills. And a lot of the times, these trump your actual product management experience, right? Like if you're trying to lead big teams, having had the prior experience of having led big teams will really work in your favor. And if you're demonstrated that, okay, you've successfully led a project or you've led a big team into success, you can really talk your way into a product management role, right? And lastly is the communication and project management skills, because again, as I said, right, with product management, what happens is you're effectively also a project manager, right? Like you're working on a big product, you have multiple stakeholders, you have multiple guys doing work for you, right? So if you have project management skills from beforehand, why not parlay them into something for product management? And communication, again, right? Like extremely important for product management. Day to day, my day-to-day job is half of it is communication, just talking to people, letting them know, right? So if you have done that before, if like 50% of your day is that, and if you're effective in that, why not use that to your advantage, right? The next part is, okay, now that you kind of really thought about your skill sets, the next goal is to identify the correct opportunities, right? And then there's two approaches here. There's the direct approach, which says, all right, I know I have this set of industry experience with so much project management experience and so much leadership experience. So I'm going to go find a role, say, for example, in this case, the financial services industry. I have the domain knowledge. I might not have been a product manager before, but I can talk my way and let them know that, hey, I know the industry, I know the customers, so I can definitely work in product management, right? But the one I'd like to focus more on is more of the indirect approach, which is actually moving from a non-product management role internally to a product management point, which I believe is a very good avenue into product management, because if you go out there and look at a lot of product management roles, you'll see that they require some level of prior product management experience. that was a problem that I faced, and I was always like, how do I get beyond this, right? Like for my entry level product management role, I need 1 year of product management. How, like, what's going on, right? So I was like, okay, there has to be another way, right? So then that's why I feel another way would be just internally, if you're working for a technology company or a company that has a product management function, maybe start thinking about moving internally. And that might be a little bit more easier if you don't have the prior experience. So now, because I'm going to focus more on the latter use case, which is how do you move internally, let's talk about what are some things you can do to position yourself to move internally, right? To start off with, learn about the product and learn about its customers, right? Like that's the most important thing. If you want to be a product manager for a product, and if you have no idea what the product's doing, why it's there, what are the customers, why was it built, no one's going to even take you seriously, right? Like you need to really understand, okay, why was my product built? What was the customer base that was thought of when the product was conceived? Why were the features that are there currently in the market prioritized that way? So just start thinking, diving a little bit deeper into why the product was built and who the product was built for, right? Try to understand the roadmap, right? Go talk to your product manager and let them know, like, hey, what's coming down the pipeline? Why are you building the features that you're building, right? Like, what is the long-term goal for this product, right? Are we trying to acquire new customers? Are we trying to grow the product line to start looking into different lines of businesses? Are we just doing infrastructure level work just to set up for something even bigger, right? So just trying to understand what are the goals of your product team as a whole. And more than that, right, try to understand the landscape, right? So now you understand how your product's doing. Just go a little bit further behind and understand the entire market, right? Understand who are your competitors. Try to figure out what are they doing. Try to figure out what are some of the things they are doing well that potentially we might not be doing that we can do to get better, right? So all of these will really show that you have made an effort to understand what the product is and what the business is, and that you're trying to learn so that you can start go ahead and actually making an impact as a part of that business, right? The next one is express interest, right? I mean, this, I know it sounds super silly, but that's the most important thing, right? Like go up to this whatever product team you want to work on and let them know that, hey, look, I work in XYZ team, but I'm interested in a product management role. How can I do it, right? Like if you get, and I would say do it early, right? Like if it's something that you aspire to do, there is no harm in letting people know that, hey, this is something you want to do. Because what you'll realize is people will actually work with you to kind of help you be successful. Because I've done a lot of recruiting, and I can tell you trying to find good talent is really hard. So if a product team can hire internally and they know who you are and they work with you, they'd be more than happy to do so, right? So do that and try to understand, hey, now that I understand your team's hiring, what are the skill sets that you're looking for, right? Just try to gauge an understanding for like, hey, what are some things I have or I can learn that will help me potentially gain this job. The next one would be a good one is shadowing product manager, right? So just talk to the product manager on the team you are interested in, and just shadow him for a day, right? Just understand what is a day in the life of that person, right? Like what are the different meetings he or she goes to, what are all the different stakeholders they interact with, what's the cadence of like engineering meetings, right? Like are they doing Scrum, are they doing Agile, are they doing Waterfall? Try to understand like what are their, like what do they talk about in daily stand-ups, what are the different regular meetings that have been scheduled, right? Like just try to shadow the product manager just to see every day what does he do, right? Because that will give you also a really good insight into, all right, if I did take on this role, these would be my day-to-day activities. And it'll also help you understand that, okay, if I had to do this on a day-to-day basis, internally you will know that, okay, I would probably have to learn about these skills, or I have to pick up these things so that I can get better at whatever I need to do, right? Learn about the partner teams they were working with, right? Like, again, product management, can't stress this enough, very, very multifunctional, works across multiple groups. So start understanding like, all right, what are the different teams this product team works with, right? Business operations or product support. I believe this is a great team to talk to because they are front line of your product, and they really understand what are some of the issues that are going on with your product and what are your end customers saying. And that would be a good avenue to understand, okay, what are some of the bugs in the system? How is some of the functionality supposed to work for different products? What are some of the workflows from, like, what's the golden path for a customer? And these are all things that business operations can really help you with. Software engineering, a key part of product management. They're your partners in pretty much everything. They're the ones helping you build out the software. So talk to them, understand how they interact with product management, try to understand what do they expect from product managers, and see what do they think about good product managers versus bad product managers. All of this, when you keep talking, you can also talk to teams like marketing and legal, just to understand, like, okay, what are some of their job functions and how do they interact with product management, right? Like, what does marketing do, right? When you're launching a feature, how is marketing involved? How is product involved with marketing? When does product reach out to marketing to become a part of the planning cycle, right? So these are all things you'll only understand by speaking to them. And more importantly, what this does is it lets the partner teams know that, hey, person X is really interested in product management, because not only have they shadowed the product manager, they've also made the effort to come talk to all of us, see how they interact with each other, and what are some things all of us. And we have given them insights to say, like, hey, you know what, these are some things we'd like to get from a good product manager. And this one, which I think is super helpful, is actually take part in the product release. And this might not always be possible, right? Like, once you've done your research, you've got a better understanding for the product, for your customers, what are some things that are wrong. If possible, propose a feature to the product team, right? Like, just let them know that, hey, you know what, based on my research and from what I've understood, what I've spoken to everyone in the company, this is potentially a feature we can build into our product, right? And this might not be possible every single time. And if it is, not an issue. Just talk to a product manager about, hey, tell me about a big feature you're building today, right? And understand why that big feature is being built, right? Like, go all the way to the bottom. Be like, okay, why was it proposed? What was the groundwork that was done to validate that this feature is something we actually need to build? Was there a cost benefit analysis done, right? Was there a survey sent out to understand if this is a need for the customer, right? So start all the way at the bottom, understand why a feature was proposed, talk to the in depth about the details, right? Like, maybe look through the stories around, okay, what are all the different stories for development that I'm writing that need to get executed to build my product, right? So get involved from the beginning. And if you are able to propose a feature, right, demonstrate the value for that feature, right? Because if you show your product manager that, hey, you know what, I did this research, here's the data behind why I'm proposing this particular feature, he'll already be impressed, because it's like, hey, you're doing his job for him, right? So and then once you've done that, either you propose it or you're working on a feature right from the beginning. You can work with the PM through the development cycle, right? Like, try to go through sprint planning meetings to understand, okay, what are all the different what are all the tasks that are being picked up on a week to week basis, right? Attend sprint retrospectives to understand how did the sprint go. Start attending demos for all of these to understand, like, okay, how is my feature being developed? Is it looking good? And then lastly, actually work with the PM for the release and the post-release cycle reporting. So start thinking about, okay, once the release does happen, how should we release it? Should there be communication sent out to our customers? What are some of the metrics we need to measure the success of this release, right? And work with the product manager to instrument them and actually monitor them, and then report them out to the business so that people know that, you know what, this person executed an end-to-end cycle, right? Like, now you not only released the feature, you're also spoken about what is the value of this feature to the customer, and now you're shown it with data, and you said, you know what, based on my post-release monitoring, whatever metric I was looking to push up by whatever percent has now happened, right? So has this worked? And the answer is yes. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, where this happened. So I used to work on the business operations team in our financial tech, and my team's role was to actually maintain our platform and our software. So what would happen is our end customers would put in tickets for stuff that's not working, and my team would be the one that would go in, look into these issues, and actually fix them in the code at the back end. So I did that for about 2 years, and over the 2 years, I got a really good understanding for not only like our product, but also for our code base, and also for the teams I was working with closely, right? Like, I was working with product, I was working with software engineering, and I started figuring out that, you know what, product is something I really want to do, because it really helps me leverage all of these skills that I've gained over the past couple of years working in business operations not only around the business side with the product and the customers uh, and our offerings, but also on the technology side, on the side of like, hey, what is our code base? What are the different, like, since mine was a slightly more technical role, we used to actually hit individual files and like fix issues, right? So I could speak to an engineer at that level. And I felt that this was the perfect opportunity for me to kind of make that switch. So I spoke to a product manager of the team that I wanted to move to. And I told him precisely this, that I said like, hey, I had done this analysis for one particular bug that kept happening. I went to him and I said, hey, you know what? Here's some reporting on this issue. This has caused this much loss of revenue. This is what the potential fix could be. Can we go do it? And he said, yes, go run with it. You can just work with me to get the resources you need. So I went in, worked with the engineering team, got that fix out. Everything started working. He realized that I was super interested in it. I worked with the software engineering team. They were pretty happy working with me. And after that, I actually went interviewed for it, got the role, and I've been in product ever since. So definitely it can be done. And it just takes some effort on your side to do some of the pre-work and actually get yourself to be in a position which will allow you to kind of make that move, right? And lastly, I'd like to talk about how you can be successful in your role once you've actually made the transition, right? So now we started off by talking about what's a great product manager. We spoke about what are some things you can do to kind of position yourself to get into that role. And now you're in that role, right? Like you've made the switch, you're working as a product manager, it's day one. Now you want to be successful in this role, right? Like how would you want to navigate at least the first like 90 days of product management so that it will set you up for success in that career going forward? Meet people. I think again, the theme comes back, right? Like it's a team effort. As a product manager, you're working with multiple people, right? Like you want to start first off by meeting other people on your product team. Just understand what are the different parts of the product that different people are working on. They're subject matters experts in their product area, so learn from them, right? Understand what is the business impact of whatever product they're managing. Understand what's coming down the pipeline for them. Understand why they made the decisions they did, right? Meet your engineering teams. These are the guys who are actually executing on your product vision, right? So understand how they interact with your product team. Understand, what are their expectations from your side when it comes to you being a product manager. Start meeting your product partner business teams like marketing, finance, legal, just to understand, be like, hey, how do you get them involved, right? Like as you become a product manager, it becomes very crucial for you to make sure that the right people are always involved in making decisions, right? Like for example, at my financial services company, what we used to do was we used to send out outward facing emails to people. And the first time I didn't realize it, I thought you could just send it out without anything. So I drafted an email and sent it out. And then all of a sudden, this legal lady was behind my back and was like, hey, how did you not get this approved? Right. So there are going to be very, very minute details that you'll have to keep in mind. And it'll be your job at that point to get all these people involved, right? So start meeting everyone to get a better understanding for how all of your teams interact with each other. Meet your stakeholders, right? These are some of the most crucial people that you will interact with at your time as a product manager, right? So these are guys who are giving you requirements for how to build your products, right? Like these could be internal stakeholders, these could be external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders could be guys like marketing that say like, hey, you know what? We need you to modify the application in this way so that we can run these sort of marketing, right? Or you can get financial requirements that say, hey, we need to report this set of data. So can you build that out for us, right? On the other hand, you could also have external stakeholders around like, say, sales guys, right? Like who are talking to your external customers. They come back to you and say, hey, you know what? We realize that this feature is absolutely essential for this percent of our customers. Please go build it, right? Or you could have stakeholders in the terms of partner engineering teams that you end up working with, where as you look into product management in bigger companies, what you'll notice is that to build your product, you often need help from services that have been built by other teams. So in that case, you have stakeholders on other engineering teams that need to actually get work done for you, right? And in that case, you need to make sure that they're always aware of what you're working on. So meet all of those guys and understand how they work with you, right? And lastly, I always talk about business operations because that's where I came from. But I genuinely believe it's a good team to understand the current state of your product. And especially it will give you a better understanding for what's wrong with your product, right? Like, because business operations is the team that's actually going in and helping support people. So they can tell you what the common problems today are, what are some of the things everyone's talking about, what are some things people wish they had. So it's a great conduit for you to actually think about, to get a pulse on what your customer base is thinking. Learn about processes, right? Like, very unfortunately, processes are a big part of a product manager's job. As your teams scale and grow and as your products scale and grow, it is very important to have a very strong process in place to be successful, right? Like, when you're a smaller team, you can do things ad hoc and stuff works out. But as you become a bigger and bigger company, and as your product scales and as your team scales, you need to have the right processes in place to be successful. This could be everything from, like, how do we think about the development process? Do we want to be an agile shop or a waterfall shop? What, do we need to go Scrum or Kanban, right? So these are all the things you want to understand how the team is working on. Try to understand how goal planning works, right? Like, what are the inputs that go into goal planning? Do you go in and get, do you get data from internal stakeholders and that goes into your goal planning exercise? Is there goals that have been set up for the next 10 years and you're working towards them? Is it a top-down goal which comes in from, like, you kind of have to work your way up to kind of support those? Just understand how the goal planning exercises work at your company, because that'll be a key part of your job too, right? Understand about success metrics reporting, right? So a biggest part of a PM's job is to demonstrate value for their products, right? Like, if you're building stuff and you can't say with clarity that, the thing I built is useful for people, what's the point, right? So you need to be able to show people with data that what you have built is actually working and people are actually using it, right? So understand how people are thinking about success metrics and how they're reporting it, because you'll be doing that a lot, right? And lastly, the communication cadence, right? Like, understand what are some of the reports that are being sent out, right? Like, who are the key stakeholders that reports are being sent out to? What are the different meetings that have been set up with engineering, with your different stakeholders, right? Like, what are some meetings that you probably need to set up, right? Just start figuring out what is the communication cadence. Are you guys sending out sprint updates? Are you updating stuff in your internal Confluence page and just saving the data there? Just know and get a feel for how your product team is thinking about communication, because you will be doing a lot of that as well. Again, learn about your product, right? Like, you would have done this pre-research about the product, but once you get into a product management role, it's a whole new ballgame, right? Like, now you need to know the insides and out of your product, right? People will look to you to be the subject matter expert about that product. So you better know what's going on, right? So go in and try to read product documentation around what works and what are the different features today, why were they built, what was, maybe try to look into, like, we call them product requirement documents, to help understand, like, hey, what are some of the things the product manager thought about while building it, right? Maybe think about proposal documents for, like, hey, why were certain features proposed, right? Do product demos, right? Like, the best way to learn about a product is to actually look at it work, right? So go to potentially a salesperson or an engineering person or even your fellow product managers and actually talk to them about having them give you a demo for how some of the features of the things you'll be interacting with work, right? Once you see them live, it will become really easy for you to think about, how do we build it, how do we grow it, right? Learn about what are the features that are being developed right now, right? So understand why are certain things being built. Try to figure out, like, were they compliance requirements? Were they requirements that came in after doing a survey? Were they requirements that came in from you going out there and talking to customers, right? Why are the features being developed? How are they going to make an impact? What is the plan to kind of move forward? Is this a big project? Is it just a bug fix? It will really help you get a lay for, like, just the current landscape for, like, what the team's focused on and what's coming down the pipeline. Learn about the product roadmap and the long-term plans, right? Like, this will really help you gain an understanding for what's forward-looking, right? It's now that you kind of, when you know what the current features are being worked on are, you can start thinking more long-term and say, what does the team think the company will be in 5 years, right? Or, like, what are some of the things that are coming down the pipeline for this particular year, right? So these are all things that you'll only learn by looking a little bit more into the product roadmap, learning a little bit more of the longer term plans, because that will also affect the way you think about it and how you want to frame your product, right? Because it has to be in line with, say, what the longer term plans are for your product. More importantly, learn about your customer, right? Like, because now you're their representative in the room, so you need to know what they want, right? So a good one is to actually sit in on support calls or sales calls just to understand how is your sales team selling your product to your end customers. Or on the support side, you can listen to, okay, what is your customer complaining about, or what are they talking about, or what are they having difficulties with? It really gives you a good insight into what your customer is thinking about. Another good one is conduct customer interviews and just get an understanding for how they feel about your product, and how do they think about what are some things they like, what are some things they don't like, what are some things they wish they had, so that you can actually go in and actually talk to them about it and actually put that in potentially just to help you get a better understanding for what are some areas you might potentially want to focus on once you start, right? Learn about previous survey insights, right? Like if you go to a product team, I can guarantee you that someone or the other would have done a survey at some point to gain some insights into it, right? Start thinking about those, start looking into those and start seeing what are some of the insights that were gained from these surveys. And more importantly, how are they executed on, right? Like what was the problem that was identified and what was the solution that was proposed to actually fix the problem, right? Uh, Another one, which I cannot stress enough, is actually continual improvement, right? As a product manager, I feel you are always learning. Just doing a time check. Okay, perfect. You're always learning and you're always attending. So I would highly recommend that you go out there and start attending conferences, right? There's conferences focused on product management, which actually deal with very specific aspects of product management, and they can really help you grow in particular areas, right? Like if you think once you join product management, there's a particular area you feel like you could do better in, or you're like, hey, I don't really have the knowledge here. You can go out there, find a conference that addresses that and go to it, right? And you'll hear a variety of speakers speak on very specific topics. And these are guys who really have experience in those fields. So there's a lot of valuable insight to be gained there, right? Attend meetups. Again, similar, right? Like now it's actually become very easy for us to discover different meetups that really have a targeted focus. So go out there and try to figure out like what are areas that interest you and start going to meetups, right? Like again, you'll hear from people in the industry who have been there potentially for 15, 20 years, and they really have a good understanding of their particular field. So why not learn from them, right? Take classes, right? There's a ton of different resources all around the place that you can help to continually grow yourself, right? Like, for example, when I joined product management, I wasn't very strong at SQL. And what I realized was at my first company, we were a pretty small company, so we didn't really have a business intelligence team. So it was my job to actually write my query and find out, right? So took a class in SQL, and it really helped me do my job way better because now I could actually go in and look for insights myself rather than having to depend on someone, right? Like, I think life is about continual learning. So why can't product management be, right? So just always keep thinking, how can you better yourself? And these are some just methods to do so. And I think lastly, I'd like to leave you guys with one thing. Even if you forgot everything I said till today, right? Like all of the things I said till now, I would like you guys to remember one thing, which is the key part about product management, which is, I think, core to everything you do, right? Like once you get into the role, always ask the question, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, right? Like if you ask that question at every point when you're making a decision, you'll realize that you'll be successful, right? Because a lot of the times you will see that people jump to conclusions without really understanding why they're doing what they're doing, right? And your job as a product manager is to rein them back in and let them know that, hey, you know what, the solution isn't that important right now, right? Let's understand what the problem is and let's figure out how to fix that solution. Don't tell me, hey, let's go make this change in the code and done, right? Like, no. Tell me what is your problem and then leave it up to me to come back to you with a solution, right? Because that's my job. That's what I'm hired for. And I think I have a particular perspective on things which you don't, which will allow me to make a better decision on how we should proceed, right? So I would say I think that is key, right? So always ask yourself what is the problem you're looking to solve, and that I'm sure will help you be way more successful rather than just jumping into the solution. And with that, I'm done. Any questions? Maybe.